All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Therapy and Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brett Scott. With me here today is Jason Feairheller.
Yes, you got it. Feairheller.
He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He has taught the course Functional Speed Training for Fitness Professionals and the Healthcare Provider. He's also co-host of the popular podcast, the Speed and Power Podcast. He has 17 years of experience in this field, and he's created the concept of multi-directional power. And he has an awesome Instagram page. So if you're an athlete or even an adult that wants to get faster, be more athletic for whatever sport you might be playing, definitely check out some of the drills he's doing on there. What is your Instagram handle so people can check it out now?
It's just at my first and last name, Jason Feairheller. Check the show notes to spell the last name.
Yeah, Feairheller.
Yes, yeah.
You need a different handle, man. That's not an easy... I had to spell that like 3 times last night, and I was like, I had to look at it every time. But anyways, to just get right into things, what are the factors that make someone fast? As just a brief overview.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at speed, and I'm going to take a step away and not just talk about linear speed first, because linear speed, we can talk about like your stride frequency, your stride length, your power when you hit the ground, your ground contact time, and all those things play a huge role. And they also play a role in what I would term like game speed and the speed that athletes display on the field. But if I'm breaking down speed on the field, it's 2 different things. It's their cognitive ability, and that's the agility component. And part of that is how you perceive actions on the field, what the score might be, the environment that you're in, the opponent that you're playing. All of those things dictate how you're going to move and perceive action and the steps that you're going to take next. The other part of that, and I think this is the part you're kind of getting to, is your actual physical capacity to move within those things. So if we took away the reactive component of things, we are still looking at time on the ground, and this refers to anytime we change direction. We want to limit time on the ground as much as possible. We want to rotate our trunk the new direction of travel, and along with that, we're turning our head, and the quicker we can kind of see what's going on, the faster we're going to be if we know where we're going to go. We still need strong concentric power to propel ourselves once we change direction. We need high eccentric strength to decelerate whenever we're changing direction, because the deeper knee flexion we have whenever we change direction, that automatically means we're going to be slower when we come out of that. I always like to think of it, if we are doing a squat and I have the same weight on the bar and I do a quarter squat, I can accelerate much faster from that position. Versus if I'm doing a squat and I'm going all the way down, it's going to be a little bit slower for me to get it going, and then I can accelerate at the top. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at change of direction, we need that strength component because we see it in the amount of knee flexion that someone has whenever they're changing direction.
That makes sense. I never thought about the cognitive ability side. So do you know if there's any like studies or anything just showing like people's brains can react or be trained to react faster to like a decision they have to make?
They definitely can. Rob Gray wrote a good book called How We Learn to Move. And in that, he talks a lot about like developing the cognitive components. Now, what's interesting too is he also talks about if your physical capacity changes, it will change your cognitive ability. And that could mean whether you even get stronger, whether you actually even get bigger. And like one example they did was like, a pregnant woman was like walking through a specific doorway, and at a certain point she realized she would have to like turn a little bit to go through the door. And it wasn't anything that necessarily happened other than like her cognitive ability and her awareness of her actual like physical capacity and her physical size at the time made her realize, I'm going to turn or I'm going to like hit my stomach on the door frame here. But as far as athletes go, think about like if an athlete is slower, they will typically give a lot more space to the faster athlete because they're not reacting quite as quickly. And they need that space because if they're a little bit slower, they need the extra step to know where they have to go. But if you have an athlete who is super fast, they can defend right up on the next person, because even if they are a half a step slower on the reactive side, they know they can make up for it within like a few yards because they have that amount of speed. So your physical capacity will change your cognitive ability. And I always think about it like kids these days practice sport a ton. So to me, that's like the reactive cognitive ability of it. But I don't think enough are truly breaking down the physical capacity side and all of the things that could make them move better on the field. It's like if you're not taught something, you'll only get so far with just like reactive training. Think about like a golfer. If I were to just give you a set of golf clubs and say, all right, I want you to become a professional golfer, but give you no instruction at all, your swing would probably improve to the point where you're a decent player. But without all of those extra little factors and keys of teaching you specific things of how to hold the club, where to grip it, the type of speed you want, the type of like angle, the backswing, your rotation, all of those little things, you might not figure out on your own. You need that extra little bit. And I think that's the side that we need to lean into a little bit more. And this can be the performance side or even the rehab side, is learning all of those movements that happen within sport and how we can actually address some of those things specifically.
Absolutely. And would you say there can be a difference amongst athletes and individuals where someone might have a very fast linear speed of just like straight sprinting, but then maybe be delayed in that cognitive agility or cognitive ability to read and react to things? So maybe that's what they're missing as far as performance goes, and that's what needs to be improved?
Absolutely. I mean, two perfect examples. One, I just saw this a couple of years ago. We're doing fitness testing for a local football team, and the kid who jumped the highest, he had like a 35-inch vertical jump. He ran the fastest, and we clock like they're just top speed for one split second. He could never get on the field. I'm like, I said to the coach, I'm like, this guy's an athlete. Look at him. It was our first testing day that we did. And he's like, that guy? Like, he's never playing. Yeah. And the other example is, I don't know if you remember, Justin Gatlin tried out for the Houston Texans, and he was brought in training camp as a kick returner. And this was like right after I think he got suspended from like USA Track and Field or something like that.
He was a sprinter, right?
Yeah, he was a sprinter. He won, I don't know if he ever won gold. I know he won silver multiple times in the Olympics, but elite speed. And he's like quoted as saying like, it's just different, like running straight ahead versus moving and reacting to all of these things. Like you just couldn't compute it. So you can train those things, and there are ways to go about that, but it is difficult.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because thinking back, I'm just laughing now, because when I was in high school, I played football, and I was not the fastest kid on the team as far as like a 40-yard dash is concerned. I was an offensive guard and a middle linebacker. And every year we would do, in spring training or whatever, preseason, we do like the shuttle run, the 5 yards back and forth. And I always had the fastest time, and the coach would make me do it like 4 or 5 times because they didn't believe that I could change directions that fast, because I was slow at the 40. But I proved them wrong every year. So maybe I have better cognitive ability than I do. Well, that's a little different too in game time decision making, but just an interesting thing that kind of brought up for me. So, would you say too, another interesting thing, and people don't like that I have to tell them this sometimes, is I'm a proponent of genetics play a lot of factors in athletic performance. Like we see it as kids, there are some kids that are just naturally better at certain sports, and they kind of always stay towards the top of their, peers as far as performance, and not that others can't improve, but it seems like some people just have certain genetics that determine these things. So how much of that do you think plays a role in speed?
So I think genetics particularly plays a role in top end speed. And it might not limit you as much as you think it could in sport. And like, no, you might not be able to dunk, but you can certainly learn how to change direction and accelerate much faster, because a lot of change of direction does have a strength component to it, and being able to slam on the brakes. And as I mentioned before, doing that with limited knee flexion allows you to kind of pop out of that change of direction a little bit faster. And a lot of times in sport, we are only going a few yards before we're changing direction. So it really is the ability to accelerate. So if we combine good movement patterns and with like quality strength training to help someone's acceleration, those are huge factors. That being said, if the other guy with good genetics does the same thing, you're still not going to be as fast as they are. So it does play a role. And the other thing you could think about too is like, if you know someone is really limited genetically, then maybe you want to lean into that like cognitive side a little bit more. You want them to be able to read and react faster, so it makes them seem like they're faster when they're playing their sport, just because they're that half step ahead of somebody else.
And so when you're training speed with someone and you're trying to improve their change of direction and agility, say, how much of that comes down to just that cognitive ability to do so versus how much of that would you say is related to having to improve their actual physical strength?
This is a fantastic question. So if I have someone younger particularly, and a good example of this is like I had a lacrosse player a few years ago, and he came in, his parents were like, I want him to get faster. And this is a really good test for anybody. You have somebody do a push-up start where they're in like a tall plank position. They already have one leg up, so they're ready to take off. And you watch their shin angle at toe off. And if their hips glide upwards before going out, they lack a ton of strength. They don't have the strength to push themselves at a good angle and maintain balance. They can't push from that kind of really deep positive shin angle. They need that shin angle to be much more vertical in order to just maintain stability and be able to then go through that. So that is a good assessment. If you see that, strength needs to be a huge component of their program. Okay. And without that, you're just kind of fighting an uphill battle. Now, when I have somebody like that, I'm incorporating like maybe they're doing more sled pushes, maybe they're doing more hill sprints, because I'm really encouraging like a longer ground contact and a push against some resistance. But if somebody has the ability to maintain that low position, now I'm working a lot more on the like mechanical side of things, where I'm trying to choose drills that are going to challenge their coordination abilities, their ability to link different movement patterns, and then through those, by changing the angles, the speed into the changes of direction, the speed out of the changes of direction, all of those factors kind of lead you to choosing the proper drill for that athlete. And one other point is, and this kind of goes back to Rob Gray's book, no matter what, I'm trying to put athletes in a position where they're going to succeed performing a drill at least like 2/3 of the time. So if I have somebody perform a drill and let's say like, all right, I'm just sprinting and I want them to then sprint back. And when they do that, they cannot, like they can't hit the angles I want them to hit. They're off balance. They show instability when they're changing direction. Then that drill isn't good. I need to shorten the speed or shorten the distance of the drill. And by doing that, that limits the speed they have into the change of direction. So maybe they can't sprint 7 yards out and back and do it as well as I want them to and hit the angles I want. All right, maybe I'm going to cut that to 5 yards. All right, at 5 yards, they're doing it like half the time well. All right, now I'm going to cut it to 3 yards. All right, now 3/4 of the time, they're doing that drill well. Great. Once they do it all the time and they own that movement, then now we can progress the drill. So it's through all of those things, you're trying to choose a drill where you're allowing athletes to coordinate their movements while still improving the physical capacities of moving well and trying to ingrain good movement patterns. Because if we always choose drills that are either too difficult or too easy, they're not necessarily in a position where they're learning new things.
Yeah, you need to have that that Goldilocks effect. Now, what you're saying with that drill, though, too, is basically by limiting the distance of it, you're limiting them from getting towards top end speed, so it allows them to kind of motor plan and program how to do the drill more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about like plyometric progressions, where the amount of eccentric loading dictates the progression. So it's like, all right, 2 legs, you hop onto a box. There's virtually no loading because you're landing up on something. Next step might be just like a counter movement jump in place. All right, great. The next step after that might be like a depth jump where you have more eccentric load with each of those things. By increasing the distance or decreasing the distance, you're changing the eccentric load or the braking force that an athlete has when they change direction. So first thing that I would always start off with, besides like just general acceleration work, is a shuffle. Can an athlete shuffle? Can they perform a lateral shuffle? Can they do a couple lateral shuffles and slam on the brakes? And what does that look like? Because that will even limit their speed more because they can't shuffle as fast as they can even sprint. And then from that, all right, let's go into a lateral run. Okay, great. Now from there, let's kind of link those things where maybe I'm shuffling out and performing a lateral run back. Then maybe I'm performing a lateral run with a shuffle back. And all of those things will kind of change either a coordination aspect or the type of loading that you're seeing when someone is changing direction.
Is this something too, just thinking of like an injury prevention standpoint, that's limiting the distance? So, for example, someone comes in, they haven't been training speed and agility, and it's their first time back in the gym in 6 months. Are you going to limit the size of that drill so we're limiting all those eccentric forces and everything? So
100%. Yes, it's perfect. So like what I'm doing with someone day one is probably like just slightly more than what someone in a rehab setting might be doing with someone. A perfect example is, let's say like, all right, let's have somebody and they're not quite ready to shuffle yet. Maybe they're coming off of like some sort of ankle injury or something like that, but we still want to get that pattern. I would put a band around their waist and have them shuffle against resistance, so they're going away from the anchor of the band, and then they're shuffling back, where the injured ankle is the one that's further away from the anchor point. So when I'm changing direction, the band tension increases, so there's less load on that foot when changing direction, and then they come back. And you can manipulate the amount of tension someone has. So if you put a lot of tension on it, obviously there's not going to be much load on that ankle, but you would decrease the tension. And then eventually what I would get to with somebody is I'm having them go the other way, where I'm having them shuffle towards the anchor point, adding more speed to it, and then popping back out of that. And that would be more of like a performance side of things.
Yeah. So say your left ankle was injured, just so people can visualize this. If I had a left sprained ankle that I was rehabbing, you would start with having them put a band, say if they're doing the lateral shuffle, against their left hip, and they'd be shuffling out into the band with the left side, because that's limited.
Correct. So like, let's say, band's looped around the waist. I'm shuffling to the left, but the band is anchored on my right side.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. And then thinking of all these drills you do in change of directions, how do you kind of bucket them into or classify them into different areas of performance? I guess like there's lateral shuffles, there's sprint work, there's plyometrics, change of direction. Like how do you kind of see all these different drills in your head?
Sure. And if you go to my Instagram, you're like, how does this guy categorize anything? Yeah. Like there doesn't seem to be any sort of system to this at all. But in general, the easiest way to start categorizing things is let's look at the movement patterns first. So by movement patterns, I'm talking about linear sprinting, lateral shuffles, a lateral run. And a lateral run, some people call it a crossover run. Think if I'm looking straight ahead, I'm the linebacker, and I'm watching the quarterback, but I'm running to my right my shoulders kind of stay square towards that quarterback because I'm watching that position, but my hips are turned to my right. So I'm actually not like crossing over like a karaoke, but my hips are actually turned. So if you look from the side, it's more of a natural running gait pattern than it is like a, just like kind of crossing my feet over pattern. So that's our lateral run. We have curvilinear running. So any type of curve. Can be a tight curve, can be a long curve, but this happens a ton in sport. A back pedal, and then the last thing we have is a hip turn. So a hip turn happens. Let's say I'm facing you, and you're trying to sprint by me. I'm the defender. You're an offensive player. You're trying to sprint by me. If I have my feet, I don't know if anybody's got this on video, but if I have my feet in line, I'm punching one foot in front of my body to allow my hips to reposition the angle I need to go in order to move backwards. So rather than just kind of like opening up and pivoting, that's not what most elite athletes do. They will reposition their hips by putting a foot into the ground. And I missed this before. The other key component of change of direction is a foot strike away from your center of mass. So that leads to like a better shin angle. That leads to a better angle of acceleration. So if I'm planting a foot into the ground, I kind of want a straight line from my foot that I'm planting outside my body through my opposite shoulder. And if I have that, I have a good lean to the side. And in general, I'm in a good position to accelerate my new direction of movement.
So you want to step out like 45 degrees in front of you and to the side?
Your ability to do that is dictated by your strength and your quickness off the ground. So faster athletes, you watch some elite basketball players, they get really low, like their shins are really low to the ground, and they are just so good at moving and shifting over those short distances. The weaker athlete, and this is for the person to figure out, whether it's a coordination issue or whether it's a strength issue, how far can they punch their foot outside their center of mass when they're changing direction in order to go back the other way? Because the closer that is, if your foot doesn't strike far away from your body, typically your upper body is going to tilt and lean over the plant leg, and you'll get this kind of upper body sway and tilt, and kind of this like slow lean to one side and then back the other side. Rather than planting and being able to rotate your body, your new direction of travel. All right, so long story short, those were our movements, our hip turn, back pedal, lateral run, curve run, shuffle, linear speed. So now amongst those things, I'm looking at speed in terms of anything attacking. Anything where I'm moving forward, I consider that an attacking movement. So it could be offensive players or defensive players will perform attacking movements as well. The only difference is offensive players typically do it more than defensive players do. I have lateral movement, anything side to side. So this is like the easiest one most people go to, is just anything where I'm just staying in a straight line on one single plane side to side. And then the other part is any sort of retreating movement, anything where I'm going backwards behind me. And now when I'm looking at those things, I might perform a back pedal into a shuffle where I'm just transitioning, going backwards still. Someone's sprinting at me, I'm backpedaling, and now I'm trying to like guide them towards the sideline. I turn into a shuffle and I face them. That's just one example of a retreating movement where I'm linking to movement skills. But there's a ton of overlap amongst all of these things. Because you might go to the side and then go forward. You might go to the side and then go backwards. You might go backwards and then forward. So think of scenarios that happen on the field. And specifically, if you're one-on-one with someone, you have a huge benefit. Because all right, what position do you play? Great. What sport, or what sport do you play first? Great. What position do you play? What side of the field do you play? Okay, great. So now I know you're a defender on the right side of the field. I know that you're typically going to turn to your right more because you're going to keep players to the outside and not allow them to go to the middle. Okay, but what does it look like if you try to turn the other way and you perform a hip turn the other direction? And in general, the coordination is typically not quite as smooth as it is on the other side. So I'm looking to try to limit the mistakes or limitations that someone might have while continuing to build on their strengths. And a lot of times when you're watching athletes move, you might be able to be like, you know what, that's why injuries are happening, because you haven't developed the ability to coordinate movement and decelerate at these types of positions or these types of movements. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing goes with plyometrics. I'm pairing my attacking speed work with attacking plyometric type drills, anything where I'm moving forward. And it can just be your hide in where you're going side to side. It could be other types of like rapid fire movements. And as far as even like the plyometric stuff goes, typically I'll always start with some sort of like rapid fire movement just to try to like wake people up. Because if an athlete doesn't have quickness, first of all, being able to move their feet fast over very short distances, so there's not much load doing that, then it's going to be hard for them to move fast over bigger distances, which is the real key component. And that's where I'm looking to build unilateral power. And you can see it where I'm like, sometimes like pushing off one leg, punching back the other side. And I'm doing that, trying to like maintain a level head position where my focus is on max distance while limiting time on the ground. All right. If I'm popping up, that's going to limit my acceleration if I'm changing direction going the other way. So everything is trying to relate back to the specific movements of sport. And then I'm performing drills where I'm just trying to go as far or get as much distance as I possibly can, not necessarily worried about my time on the ground.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at this coordination of like right versus left, are you just looking at this with a naked eye? Is there a way you guys measure this? Is it the mix of both? Sometimes like weightlifting is, I coach weightlifting, and, when I was new, I had to like put everything in slow-mo. Now I can see a lot with my naked eye. Sometimes I'll still have to break things down. I'm like, what's really going on here?
So a lot of it is the naked eye, but everything relates back to a general model of movement. So without a specific model of what we're looking for, like you said, it's very difficult to say like, you know what, that one looked faster, but I don't know why it did. But with a model, and I'm always looking at what is the time an athlete spends on the ground when they're changing direction? How far away is their foot away from their center of mass when they plant, when they change direction? How quickly do they rotate their trunk the new direction of travel? And those are really the three big components that I'm looking for when people are changing direction in any sort of movement.
And then I'm curious too what your thoughts are on, you mentioned a lot about coordinating movement, right? And then there's this whole thing about compensation mechanisms that people will have. So say they have limited mobility, is that causing the coordination issue? And then there's the whole world of pain science that says biomechanics don't matter, which I don't see true, especially from a performance perspective, because physics laws apply to everything. So, what are your thoughts on like the whole, like, is there a lot of mobility things you have people doing to maintain their agility in sprinting, or case by case basis? What are your thoughts here?
So this kind of goes back to, well, I guess I'll explain coordination first. So coordination to me is the ability to link movement patterns together and to do that while still hitting those key components of change of direction. Now, depending on the angles of those and the type of movements you're doing, the speed you have going into it, some of these things can be very difficult. Like if I'm sprinting to the side and all of a sudden I take a hard 90-degree cut and I'm trying to go backwards while maintaining an angle and not rounding my turn too much, that's a difficult movement to hit. And so when I'm looking at those things, I need to figure out, does the athlete have the physical strength and the physical ability to hit that movement, or is it a lack of performing the movement and they haven't coordinated enough in their head? But either way, if they can't do it well, and that rule of that like 2/3 rule, then we need to regress the drill. And you can get to a point where you can regress the drill enough where it's like, all right, this is a physical limitation that somebody has, whether it's like lack of trunk rotation, just general instability, but it's, for the most part, it's usually a lack of strength, where they lack strength and they don't know how to display it in this type of movement.
So for you as a coach, like looking at mobility is kind of a deductive thing of it's okay, they're not coordinating it, they're not getting it, we've regressed it. Now let's take a look at mobility.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because if I start at the mobility first, it's just then too hard. I'm adding something else in already before I start to go to all of these other things. And ultimately, I'll say like dynamic mobility might be different than even like static mobility. So what are the positions that an athlete gets in at higher speeds versus what is just like their static range of motion when they're doing something? If you watch someone run on a curve and they have a ton of speed doing a curved run, it literally looks like they broke their ankle, like specifically on the inside leg, because the shin is leaning so far towards the inside of that curve. And if you were to just like take someone's ankle and just slowly do that, you're like, it's not close to going to that position. Now, that being said, I do think it is important to go through a whole bunch of different ranges of motion, specifically with the feet, the ankles, strengthening all of these things, because to me, instability is going to happen when there's a lack of strength within that system.
Yeah.
And that can be through the foot and the lower leg. It can be through the hip. And those are other things that it's tough because it is one giant puzzle that you're trying to put together.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm always looking at the movements first, breaking them down as much as possible. And then from there being like, okay, these are the few things that can get the most out of an athlete's program to help them do better on the field.
Just from a applicability standpoint too, we kind of look at things the same way as a coach of like, okay, try this. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, now let's maybe investigate more. But I think for a lot of, especially youth athletes too, like just getting them to do the drills is going to make them better sooner than like worrying about their, 2 degrees of limited ankle dorsiflexion.
Sure.
Which you might want to address on the side, but.
Yeah, like I had a kid, he's a really high level lacrosse player, and he had torn his ACL. I'd seen him like after he tore his ACL. So he had gone through his full rehab, his strength testing, he passed everything. But whenever he cut off of the leg where he had the ACL injury, he would always stutter step more. And it wasn't a strength limitation. It was a reframing his like mental frame of mind, being like, I have the ability to push off of this leg because I have that strength. So for him, especially like he's an attackman, he's trying to juke people and do all these things. And if he's stutter stepping all the time versus just planting a foot into the ground, it's less deceptive. So he's not going to get the space and create the space he wants on the field to make plays. So for him, a simple progression was like, all right, you're going to take one step and I want you to plant off of your foot to the side and then just go into a sprint. And then from there, we take 2 steps, go into a sprint. Now from here, I'm now going to set obstacles out where I'm going to dictate the angle that he's going to hit off of the plant. So initially, maybe it's like 30 degrees. All right, simple. He can easily do that. But if you're doing that into a defender, they're stopping you every time. We need to hit more degrees in order to go around someone with speed. So now, once he's had that ability where it's like, all right, I can take 2 really hard steps, get about 45 degrees. All right, now I'm going to put a box out. And now you're going to like go around the box each time. So instead of me saying, I need you to angle your foot this way, hit exactly this way, he sees what he needs to do, and then he just starts to execute. And if after 2 steps he doesn't get it, then all right, let's go back to 1 step, but I still want you to hit this angle. And those are ways that I manipulated that type of drill for him. And then I have him and his brother go one-on-one, putting him in situations where he has to plant off of one leg or the other. And this is where kind of the agility side comes into it. So I have the benefit, particularly if I have like 2 brothers coming in or a group of athletes, where I work on the skill side of it, where they know where they're going to go, they know when they're going to cut, they know the angles they're going to hit. I just want them to coordinate these movements. Then I'm using those same movement patterns that we just went over and putting them in positions where they have to read and react to someone while still doing those types of things.
Yep.
And like the drill I'm talking about where then he had to cut was I had him and his brother about 10 yards apart, and I had a set of cones about like it, and we'll say it like the 5-yard line, about 45-degree angle one direction, 45-degree angle the other direction. And on go, he had to get through one of those 2 sets of cones without his brother touching him. Mm-hmm. So he's automatically thinking like, I need to move fast. And a few times in the beginning, he would go to cut and he would still stutter a little bit. And his brother would be right there, be like, that was easy. And through the type of matching the drills where we're really focused on the movement and then pairing it with the agility, now he's doing awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the ACLs are interesting because recently they just put out a thing for sport readiness or return to sport, is that there's a psychological readiness questionnaire we give to athletes now. Because you can train them all day until you're blue in the face with strength and like pre-programmed work, but the moment you have to step on a field and react to someone instead of having things pre-programmed, everything changes.
It does, yeah.
So that's something else I wanted to talk about, and you kind of already alluded to it, of when we're looking at speed training, especially for sport and in multi-directional power, there is a time and place for just having things pre-programmed. You know you're going to run 5 yards forward, then you're going to take a 90-degree turn to the right or backpedal or whatever, right? That's one type of motor program we would call.
Yeah.
So the brain is firing the muscles in one certain way, but then when it's now I have to run after a defender and I don't know if they're going to turn left, right, spin around me, whatever, it changes the game. So can you talk a little bit about how that influences your training?
Yeah, sure. So number one thing is every single drill you do with someone, whether it's a reactive drill or whether it is just a general drill, that is an assessment. So you are constantly assessing every single drill someone does and figuring out, is this the best drill to give them the best outcome that you want for them? Like what you want out of the drill. And if you don't see what you want, then change it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But for example, like if I'm doing curvilinear running, I love doing like curvilinear type of reactive drills. So, and I'll give a few examples. I'll have a circle, big circle, maybe about like 3-4 yards in diameter, have athletes facing outside the circle. So they're on the edge of the circle, they're on opposite sides. And on my go call, they both spin around. One of them is the chaser. One of them is trying to not get caught. So the benefit is the person who is the chaser, he doesn't matter which way he goes. He's sprinting a direction as hard as he can. And he already has, at best or at worst, he's going the same direction as the other guy's going. But at best, the other person who doesn't want to get tugged has to quickly read and react and then figure out, geez, like which way do I need to go? And then from there, what am I looking for? I'm looking at how quickly that athlete can drop down to create a shin angle and accelerate around the curve. I'm looking at what is their torso lean around the curve. How far outside the circle are they actually hitting? Because a lot of times with athletes that aren't quite as fast, they'll tend to stay a little bit wider around the circle. And obviously that's going to make them slower if someone's trying to catch up to them. And now the person that is being chased at any point, they can slam on the brakes and go the other direction. Same with the person that's chasing them. They can try to catch them off guard and go the other direction. So that's part of it, is like, then what does their change of direction look like doing these things? And I will say, I usually limit these drills to about 5 seconds because I need athletes moving as fast as possible. If they're not in reactive scenarios where they need to move fast, that doesn't replicate what is likely to happen on the field. And expecting someone to then, it's like, if we just only jogged all the time and said, all right, great, now you're going to be the fastest guy in the world. That's not going to happen. All right, the same thing with like reading and reacting. We need to learn to react at fast speeds. Now, if I see somebody getting beat all the time, I'm going to change the drill. Maybe I widen the circle a little bit more, so he has a little bit more leeway to make that decision. Or if the person isn't getting beat, great. Now I'm going to tighten that circle. I'm going to challenge them even a little bit more. So those are just that is like just a good example of how you might look at a drill, assess it, change it as needed, but then based off of what you see, apply that to the next session that you have someone.
So in general, are you typically still doing, I don't know if you have a better word for it, but I would say like a pre-programmed drill?
We'll just call that. So like typically that's just like change of direction is your pre-programmed drills. Yep.
Yeah. So doing that versus doing something reactive where whether it's a one-on-one situation or like you're using something like we use Blaze pods in the clinic all the time.
Yep.
How much of each are you using? Like, because I feel like if you can get better at those pre-programmed drills to just coordinate the movement in a smoother fashion, it's going to make you faster, but we still have to react.
Yeah. So I'll typically do like 3/4 of a session, and I'll say like including the warm up, is pre-programmed drills.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm doing that, and it's for the reason I talked about earlier, where kids now, especially if they're on like club teams, they're practicing more than they ever have. So they're doing a lot of the other cognitive reactive drills in their practice all the time. Now, they might not always be at top speed, but they're still getting those all of the time. So I want to see what they look like, and is what we're doing actually improving their reactive ability ultimately, and are they moving better in reactive fashions? Because that is the end goal.
Yep.
But I'm not spending most of my time doing that, because if I see someone performing poorly and I'm only doing reactive drills, I don't know whether it is a lack of perception on their part, where they just can't make decisions quick enough, or whether it is a lack of some sort of physical component that's limiting their movement. So by doing the change of direction drills, I'm already figuring out, all right, I'm trying to put them in positions where their physical ability is not going to be limited within this drill, because I've manipulated the drill. So it's probably like a 50-50 outcome, whether they succeed or whether they don't.
Yep. My next piece here goes into, you're looking to frame someone's program. So say that, they're an athlete and the main goal in this off season is to increase their speed and agility. How are you going to structure their sprint work or speed multi-directional work with an actual strength training plan?
Sure. I'm a big fan of, well, number one, in an ideal world, I'm seeing somebody 5 days a week. I'm giving them a max speed day, an acceleration day, an attacking change of direction day, a side-to-side day, and a retreating day. And a lot of those things will overlap. And I'm a much bigger fan of doing something regularly versus trying to have one session, maybe even 2 sessions a week, where I'm trying to cram all of those different things in. Because if I'm doing, let's say I'm just doing a side-to-side day, I might be doing primarily a shuffle. I can ingrain that pattern way better if I'm doing way more reps of that shuffle versus I'm doing a shuffle drill once a week and it's just part of my warm-up and that's it. Like, it's hard to learn that way. I understand that's not the reality for a lot of kids, though. So what would I do otherwise? If I have somebody 3 days a week, then I'm typically doing attacking day, a side-to-side day, and a retreating day. And within that attacking day will be some form of just linear speed work, where I'm just trying to improve their speed going straight ahead. As far as the strength stuff that goes with that, on their days where I'm getting, and I'll go back to like the 5 day a week example first. On their days where they're doing their top end speed work, that's when I'm doing their heavy leg days. Okay. Because I want the day that is the most neurotaxing for them, and this is if we're running like 30s, 40s, something like that, to match the same taxing neuro day that they would have it if they did heavy strength work that day. And if I waited until the next day to do it, that's not really a good idea either. And if I waited till the next day to do it, then maybe they're recovered, but then maybe they're only getting in like one heavy day a week. So on day 1 and day 4, those would be my heavier leg days. And then day 2, day 5, that would be my heavier upper body days. And day 3 would be, along with like some change of direction speed work, I would call it just like a general mobility type day where I'm taking athletes through big ranges of motion. We're focused on hips, shoulders, ankles, trunk rotation, pretty much all of those things. And now, obviously, we're changing up that program. It's not going to be like max out every single day of the week. There's going to be a heavier and a slightly lighter day for each of those upper and lower body days. But in general, I'm hitting upper body, lower body 2 days a week each. Now, if someone's coming in 3 days a week or less, then it goes to a total body lift each time.
Yeah. And will you work in like almost like a conjugate style of like speed work as something, as a, one of the strength modalities of like, I can think of, I train powerlifting and weightlifting or coach both sports. And weightlifters move much faster than powerlifters do, even though powerlifters are stronger, maybe.
Yeah.
So what is your thought on that?
In general, like, I want them to get stronger for sure. I don't want their speed to be limited by the amount of strength work that I'm doing. So I'm not trying to absolutely crush somebody. But even with, like, I'm a fan of doing both Olympic lift variations and just general strength work. But for the strength work, I want them to focus on that transition from the eccentric to the concentric. I need them to try to push out of that as hard as they can every rep. Because ultimately, like, that's change of direction, is you are going to slamming on the brakes to pushing out of that. And it doesn't matter what drill we're doing. I want them to think about accelerating as they stand up each time.
So will you want something that they're like Olympic lifter squatting, like you can kind of bounce out of the hole? Or do you want someone to like come down, become motionless, and then drive up hard?
Depends on the part of the program. Like they're all in there at some point, but it will get to the point where it's closer of them just like ripping out of the bottom.
Okay.
And then I do like just general like isometrics where you're pushing into immovable objects at different kind of positions and different types of knee hip flexion variations doing that. But going back to the question about like a conjugate model of speed, yes, I love doing a ton of variations within the same type of movement. Whether I'm changing the angle a little bit, I'm adding a little bit of resistance to it. I might even just change the drill by having them look somewhere different. Where, all right, you're going to do this drill, but you're going to keep your eyes fixed on this spot the whole time. All right, great. You're going to do the same drill, and you're going to look the opposite direction that you're going. Cool. Now you're going to look the direction that you're going. And all of those things change the drill a little bit, but ultimately we're still doing the same thing.
And to kind of just top that off, when it comes to strength training, what errors are people typically making that's limiting their ability to produce speed and multi-directional power?
I don't think people in general, well, I shouldn't say in general. You have to find a weight that challenges the athlete. You just have to find the appropriate weight. It can't be too heavy where they get crushed and they can't complete the number of reps that you want them to do. But at the same time, in general, what I see is today, athletes leave way too much in the tank when they're performing a set. If you want them to do 8 reps, they choose a weight they could probably do really like 12 to 15 reps if they really wanted to. So I think it is challenging them and getting them to figure out how and when to push themselves, because you can do that without focus on injury or something like that. But you just have to find the appropriate stimulus for them. Yeah.
And then do you think people in their like 30s, 40s, 50s should practice sprinting or not sprinting, but even just multi-directional speed work? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know about multi-directional speed work. Depends on what they're doing. If they're doing pickleball, yeah, sure, a little bit. But I think they need to do something, I'll call it like dynamically. And that can be jumping rope. It should be running more than a speed you can maintain at a mile. Just doing something that is a little bit faster than what you're used to. And I mean, you don't want to be the guy who goes to play pickup basketball and tears his Achilles because you didn't do anything the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Seen a couple of those.
Yeah.
Softball gets them every time.
Yeah.
I've made a lot of money off of softball injuries. But, and then, yeah, the last thing I want to ask you about is, Olympic lifting. So how much would you say, because I know a lot of like sprinters will use Olympic lifting to improve their power output. But what about for just multi-directional athletes?
So I do think the weight room is more of like a form of general strength. And I'm not necessarily trying to match the exact patterns of speed with what we're doing in the weight room. In general, if I'm doing a max speed day, I'll typically do cleans from like a higher position, either from like the mid thigh or even just the top of the knee. If I'm doing an acceleration day, then it's usually like a muscle snatch or a snatch variation because I want them to really focus on extending longer because it's like a longer pulling time up to match that same sort of longer push they have off of initial acceleration.
Interesting. Never thought about it that way. All right, man. Well, I know we got to wrap up here in a minute because you got to go. I think, actually, do I got time for one more question?
Let's do it.
What are the biggest things you see that cause not cause but cause injuries with some of this type of work? And what are the big things that prevent it?
I mean, this could be a huge answer, but I'll say, in general, people don't understand the mechanics of multi-directional movement. That is number one. It's like if you go to pretty much any physical therapy clinic, somebody's there that can do gait analysis and watching you run. But when we're doing sport, that's not what's happening the large majority of the time. So we need to have a model of movement of what does a shuffle need to look like? What should it look like? What does a lateral run look like? What does a curved run look like? And when we start looking at all of those things and all those pieces, like linear speed is just one tiny part of the equation. We need to have that same model of understanding through everything else. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we can learn how to create stability in all of these different positions. Because to me, it really comes down to learning how to rapidly create stability. Because when you're reacting to someone, you're usually planting one single foot into the ground. You're not stopping with 2 feet at the same time. It's just quick, I'm repositioning 1 foot, slamming into the ground. So we need to understand these models of movement, and then from there, developing unilateral power, unilateral multi-directional power specifically, because we are going to be landing and needing to create stability on a single leg all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will, we'll cut off here. Jason, where can people find you? I know you mentioned your Instagram, but you actually kind of made me want to buy. You have a course too for healthcare providers on some of the stuff of.
I do. The course, yes, it's it goes through different movement patterns. It goes through how I use multi-directional power to improve those movement patterns. It's on the website multidirectionalpower.com. I'll send you a code so anybody listening can get some off.
Awesome. Cool. I appreciate it, man. Well, thanks for coming on. And I still got more questions for you and now even more thoughts because I just learned a lot here. So I appreciate your time.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Appreciate all the work you've put into your craft here. And let's get you back on sometime. We can learn more.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, man.
84% of you that listen to this podcast frequently do not hit the follow button. If you've enjoyed any of these episodes, could you do us a favor and hit the follow button, leave a rating, and maybe leave us a review? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. If you'd like to know more about training in person or online with Brett's Gym, Architect Fitness, please follow us on social at ARKITECT Fitness on Instagram or visit ARKITECTFitness.com. Or if you want to rehab with Barbell Therapy online or in person, check out @barbell.therapy or visit barbelltherapyandperformance.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen.